So Introduction to Universal Design for Learning is the topic for today, and the human-centered approach. And as I said, my name is Amy Julie, and I'm joined by Brittany Boston from the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support. And what we're going to talk about, before we get into that, I want to go into really the agenda for the learning renewal. So each month we're going to get together. That calendar is out next week. Next month we're going to talk about marketing, and then we're going to move into summer bridge programs and such. But that calendar is out there. We'll be sending that out again on not like a weekly basis, but usually once a month, so you know what's coming. You can sign up for all of them, or you can sign up for them as you like. But we're going to start with an introduction and content. So we'll have a little presentation at the beginning of each section. Then we'll have some discussion. Then we'll talk about challenges and accomplishments. And then if there's any updates from the state, from ICCB, they'll have an opportunity to talk about that. And then we will convene. We did allow 90 minutes. I don't know that we'll take all 90 minutes today, but if we do, fantastic. And if we don't, we won't tell anybody, and you can get some time back to your day. With that, I do also want to make you aware that we have quarterly reflection time. So every quarter, ICCB has asked for time that if you're having challenges, if there's barriers, if there's things that you're struggling with this particular grant, with the Learning Renewal program, you can come on to those and we'll be happy to address those issues. So with that, I'm going to make sure I can see the chat here, and we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you all for joining us today. We'll go into a little bit of this content, and then I'm going to pause for questions and then get some discussion going. So in the chat, if you could post, how well do you know UDL? So go ahead and throw that into the chat there. 1 would be not at all. 2 would be somewhat. 3 had a training or 2, or 4 you could write a book, and you're going to be very participatory in this program. I see we've got every level. Oh, 2 to 3. All right, that's a fair answer. So it looks like we have people all over. I haven't seen a 4 yet. Brittany, am I missing the 4, or have we not had a 4 yet?
I have not seen a 4, but I wouldn't put myself as a 4. So some of these 3s may be secret 4s.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I don't think I'm ready to publish yet, but I have done quite a few trainings on it. So 2 to 3, that's a good place to be. So our goal for this session is to provide you an overview of universal design for learning and human-centered design. So in that same vein, and maybe it's a show your virtual hands this time, how many of you have heard of human-centered design? Show of virtual hands. Or if your camera's on, you can raise your real hand, and Brittany can see that, but somehow Zoom has taken my ability away to see your hand. So got a couple, okay. So what we're going to see and what we're going to discuss today is universal design for learning has been around for quite some time. It was part of the Perkins reauthorization, was part of the Higher Education Act, and it's been around for quite a while, and really we're seeing a nice infusion of it in our laws and also in our practices. Human-centered design has also been around for quite some time, and the founders are actually the same people. So there was a lot of relationship there. One is more for systems, and one is more for education. One is loved by DOL, and so you're going to hear it if you work with your workforce partners and friends out there in the system. And one is loved by educators. So universal design for learning is much more educator focused. Human-centered design is really looking at that system approach, and it also has a lot of those same fundamentals and principles. So we're going to provide an overview of both. We're going to explore the concept of and implications of variability. So we're going to talk a lot about variability today. We're going to explore some applications to your classroom. And then we hope that you're amazed at how you engage with UDL every day. And at some point during our 90 minutes together, I hope you gasp, laugh, and nod your head, because there's just a lot of fun things that happen when it comes to UDL. And I am a self-proclaimed UDL nerd. I really love universal design. It makes a lot of sense to me. It's very logical. And I think you'll enjoy it as well for those of us who are on the one spectrum there and haven't really heard about it before. So UDL is Perkins and the HEA, so Higher Education Act, define UDL as a scientific valid framework for guiding educational practices. These practices provide flexibility in the ways information is presented, in the ways students respond or demonstrate knowledge and skills, and in the way students are engaged. So really looking at that whole student and how that whole student comes to our classes and to our institutions. Universal design reduces barriers to instruction. It provides appropriate accommodations, supports, and challenges, and it maintains a higher achievement expectation for all students, including students with disabilities and students who are limited English proficient. So UDL is that idea of scientifically valid framework, but it's guiding those educational practices. Everybody with me? Good? All right, principles of human-centered design. And I do want to share a video with you, but there's 3 basic principles of human-centered design. Being human-centered, so focusing on the people who are either using the product, because again, it's used a lot with the Department of Labor, using the product, using their iPhones, things of that nature. Finding the right problem and solving the basic problem, not the symptoms to the problem, and then thinking of everything as a system. So I'm going to share this video. Let's see if this links up.
The principles of human-centered design
Anyone here?
apply even if you don't follow the process of human-centered design. Because what are the principles? Well, the first one is be human-centered. Focus upon the people that whatever you're doing is intended for, whether you're doing a service or a product or an organizational structure or a new way of, I don't know, stocking the warehouse or putting things on shelves. Whatever you're doing, always think of the people and all the people, not just the people, say, who are going to retrieve the items you put in, but the people who have to put the items up there in the first place. And if you're in the healthcare system, you have to think about patients and their families and the physicians and the nurses and also the medical personnel and the technicians, and for that matter, even the people who do the scheduling and who clean the place. You have to think of it as a system and look at all of the components. That's the second important thing. Find the right problem. Almost always when somebody gives me a problem to solve, I refuse to solve it because it's not the right problem. It's the symptom of the problem. And I want to solve the fundamental basic problem, because if I can solve the basic problem, guess what? The symptoms disappear. But that's not always so easy, and it can take a lot of time. And even though I argue strongly you should always try to solve the fundamental root problem, sometimes it's okay just to solve the symptoms. And finally, you have to think of everything as a system. Everything is interconnected. So if you solve this tiny little piece, well, that's kind of nice, but sometimes optimizing each of the small pieces gives an inferior result. Optimization of the local does not mean global optimization. And so we should always be thinking of the big picture. What is the final result we care about? And user experience isn't always the most important component. Because take a camera. What's the camera about? All those controls? No. The camera is just a tool to get the real user experience, which is the experience of enjoying the movie, the video, the picture. It's the end result that matters. And so we should be focused upon making it easier for people to get to the end result. We don't have to focus on the details of the tools. Those have to be understandable and usable. But remember, the important thing is the real goal of the people who use our products.
So that is Don Norman, and he is one of the fathers of universal design and one of the fathers of the human-centered approach. So I like showing that because it does kind of encapsulate that. And again, we're talking 30 minutes here that we're talking about this today. Please know that we have tons of video resources. We're going to share those.
I practice human-centered design.
I'm sorry.
But what does that mean? It actually can mean
He was great the first time. We don't have to hear him again. Okay, so principles of human-centered design, again, looking at being human-centered, finding the right problem, and thinking of everything as a system. So when we look at architecture and we look at the core concepts of universal design, we look at the different places in which we see them. So as I said, you're going to see a lot of overlap. And one of the things that I find very interesting, and as we were really, human-centered design was really kind of growing over the last year or so, those of us who have spent time in this universal design space were like, okay, I see it, but I also see that there's a nice tie. There's a lot of blending, very much dovetailing. So when we look at architecture, core concepts of universal design are there within architecture. If you think about when you've walked into a grocery store or a Target or any kind of store, the doors automatically open for you, that's universal design. Walking into the office this morning, the gradient on the sidewalk changed as I approached the intersection. So that I could tell that I was approaching an intersection. That's universal design. Looking at ways in which, looking at my office door handle, it's able to be open and closed with a closed fist because of that lever there. That's universal design. Looking at it in neuroscience, understanding that students learn in different ways and understanding the way in which students learn and how those connections help students learn. So being practical in our application, but also those of us who are in that career and tech ed space, that learning by doing, being able to have some hands-on activities can really help make that neurological connection to education. And so elements in practice: sustain the effort and persistence, and then engage in practice, optimize relevance, value, and authenticity. So we see a lot of those three aspects: architecture, neuroscience, and learning within the UDL core concepts. And I have another video I want to share with you. And this is a gentleman, and this is an Air Force analogy. And we talk about the jagged learning profile, simple solutions in a school setting, and then going forward. So I'm going to share this because he really does a really nice job of showing what's happening there.
It's 1952, and the Air Force has a problem. They've got good pilots flying better planes, but they're getting worse results, and they don't know why. And for a while, they blamed the pilots. They even blamed the technology. And they eventually got around to blaming the flight instructors. But it turned out that the problem was actually with the cockpit. Let me explain. Imagine you're a fighter pilot. You're operating a machine that in some cases can travel faster than the speed of sound, and where issues between success and failure, sometimes life and death, can be measured in split seconds. If you're a fighter pilot, you know that your performance depends fundamentally on the fit between you and your cockpit. Because after all, what good is the best technology in the world if you can't reach the critical instruments when you need them the most? But this presents a challenge for the Air Force, because obviously pilots are not the same size. So the issue is, how do you design one cockpit that can fit the most individuals? For a long time, it was assumed that you could do this by designing for the average pilot. That almost seems intuitively right. If you design something that fit for the average size person, wouldn't it fit most people? It seems right, but it's actually wrong. And 60 years ago, an Air Force researcher, Gilbert Daniels, proved to the world just how wrong this really is and what it was costing us. Here's how he did it. He studied over 4,000 pilots, and he measured them on 10 dimensions of size. And he asked a very simple question. How many of these pilots are average on all 10 dimensions? The assumption was that most of them would be. Do you know how many really were? 0. Gilbert Daniels proved there was no such thing as an average pilot. Instead, what he found was that every single pilot had what we call a jagged size profile, right? It means you're not, no one's at the same on every dimension. And this makes sense. Just because you're the tallest person doesn't mean you're the heaviest. It doesn't mean you have the broadest shoulders or the longest torso. But this is tricky because if every pilot has a jagged size profile and you design a cockpit on average, you've literally designed it for nobody. So the Air Force realized they had a problem, and their response was bold. They banned the average. Meaning that moving forward, they refused to buy fighter jets where the cockpit was designed for an average-sized pilot. And instead, they demanded that the companies who built these planes design them to the edges of dimensions of size, meaning that rather than design for, say, the average height, they wanted a cockpit that could accommodate as close to the shortest pilot and the tallest pilot as the technology would allow. Now, the companies that made these planes, as you could imagine, weren't happy, right? They argued and lobbied, and they said it's going to be impossible, or at least impossibly expensive, to build a flexible cockpit. But once they realized that the Air Force wasn't going to budge, suddenly it was possible. And it turned out it wasn't that expensive. And in fact, they made great strides, leveraging simple solutions that we all take for granted in our everyday lives, like adjustable seats. And as a result, the Air Force not only improved the performance of the pilots that they already had, but they dramatically expanded their talent pool. And today, we have the most diverse pool of fighter pilots ever. But here's the thing. Many of our top pilots would have never fit in a cockpit designed on average. So, most of us have never sat in the cockpit of a $150 million fighter jet, right? But we've all sat in the classroom. And I would argue I would argue that these are the cockpits of our economy. And I think we all know that we have some problems. We're spending more money than ever before, but we're getting worse results. Whether we're talking about declining test scores in math and science, or our dropout crisis. You probably know that we have over 1.2 million dropouts every single year in high school in this country. What you may not know is that at least 4% of those dropouts are known to be intellectually gifted. That means we're losing over 50,000 of our brightest minds every single year. So we know we have a problem. But do we know why? So far, we've been content to blame the students. We blame the teachers. We even blame the parents. But here's the thing. I think back to the Air Force example, and I can't help but wonder how much of this problem is just bad design. Here's what I mean. Even though we have one of the most diverse countries in the history of the world, and even though it's the 21st century, we still design our learning environments like textbooks for the average student. No kidding. We call it age appropriate, and we think it's good enough. But of course it's not. I mean, think about it. What does it even mean to design for an average student? Because a student is not one-dimensional, like struggling to gifted. Students vary on many dimensions of learning, just like they vary on dimensions of size. Here are a few obvious ones. And just like size, each student, every single one of them, has a jagged learning profile. Meaning they have strengths, they're average at some things, and they have weaknesses. We all do. Even geniuses have weaknesses. But if the fighter pilot example has taught us anything, it's this. If you design those learning environments on average, odds are you've designed them for nobody. So no wonder we have a problem. We've created learning environments that, because they are designed on average, cannot possibly do what we expected them to do, which is nurture individual potential. But think about what that really costs us. Because every single student has a jagged learning profile, it means that the average hurts everyone, even our best and brightest. Even for them, designing on average destroys talent in at least two ways. First, It makes your talent a liability. We all know kids like this, so unbelievably gifted in one area that their educational environment can't challenge them. We also know what happens. They get bored, and a shockingly high number of them drop out. The second way that the designing on average destroys talent is that it means your weakness will make it hard for us to see, let alone nurture, your talent. We all know kids like this as well. Like the kid who is gifted in science, but who is a below average reader. Because our science textbooks assume that every kid is reading at grade level, this kid's in trouble. Because for her, science class is first.
So we're going to pause there. That is a fantastic TED Talk that we can post on the website, which is going to come very soon, and then also just share out with all of you. But I really like that video because it does talk about just that idea of universal design, looking at that jagged learning profile and looking at how we give students opportunities to succeed and play on their strengths, which is really what universal design does. So a core concept of UDL is that the barrier is in the environment, not the learner. Let me say that again for you guys. The barrier is in the environment, not the learner. So moving from that deficit mindset where we look at the student and we look at the family and we say, oh, these are the issues for our students, this is why they're not succeeding. UDL takes that and turns it on its head and says, let's look at the environment. Let's look at the barriers to coming to class. Let's look at what we can do to help eliminate those barriers. Transportation has been a big one. Fear of COVID over the last 2 years has been a big one. All of those things, and not look at the learner as the barrier to success. And then UDL is not a checklist. So you're not going to leave here today with a checklist. And if I do check, 1, 2, 3, I have put UDL in my classroom and God bless America, we're doing fantastic. What it is it's a lens through which you think about everything that you do. So how do we think about being more accessible? One of the stories that I was telling Brittany as we came in, which is going to be a great segue to our next dinner party analogy, which Brittany's going to take, is they were planning an event on campus, and we have a new dean and they're planning this event and they're going to grill hot dogs. And then we had several people say, okay, but what about vegan options? What about vegetarian options? So this is not just something that we're talking about today. This is really, we're seeing it in practices across our college campuses and in our classrooms. So Brittany, would you like to tell us about the dinner party?
Yeah, absolutely. So in that TED Talk, he mentioned, the cockpit and how it had been designed for the average pilot, and how that sort of created issues because they then learned that not every human body fits that average profile. Now, I don't know about you, but I myself, well, that's actually not true. I have been in a cockpit at the museum here in town, but if you have not, we can take it into an analogy that may be a little bit more personable to you. And when he had talked about that jagged learner profile, when we're discussing universal design, they talk about variability, which is sort of that same concept that not every student falls straight within that line of average. So let's look at a dinner party analogy. So let's say after this meeting, Amy and I decide that we're going to host all of you at ISU for a dinner party. And for that dinner party, we are going to serve this wonderful Mexican lasagna that you see on your screen. So you can see there, it's got the lasagna noodles, it's got meat with a red sauce, cheese. It looks like there's some corn, some black beans in there. I'm going to assume possibly some onions are thrown in there as well with some seasonings. So if I invited all of you to a dinner party and this was the only item that I was serving, could you see potential issues with this being the only option for the dinner? And you can feel free to type those in the chat, or if you want to unmute and shout those out.
So Brittany, I will say, we got some coming in the chat. I need vegan and gluten-free, and I have a dairy intolerance. I love dairy. Dairy doesn't love me. There, John with Jamie. So the idea of having something that is dairy-free would be fantastic. So that whole top layer for me, and I've had to do is just pull that off and go ahead and enjoy the rest of it. But yeah, some
Yeah.
could be vegetarian, absolutely.
Yeah, you guys are nailing it in the chat. So that is kind of the issues that we would come across, right? We know that individuals have specific dietary restrictions, whether it's vegan or vegetarian, lactose intolerant, gluten-free. Some people may have an allergy to corn. I have a friend who just absolutely despises onion. It's not necessarily an allergy. It's not, but they just do not like onion, and they can taste even the slightest bit of onion in their dish. So this particular item would not be the best option to serve. However, if we go to the next slide, we can take a more proactive approach and do what's kind of called a deconstructed version of this lasagna, or just a deconstructed sort of taco bar, if you will. So you can see there that we still have some of the similar elements, but they're separated out. And so people can come through and pick and choose what it is that they want. We could also even provide some gluten-free tortilla shells or some gluten-free lasagna noodles, and really making sure that we are providing variability within our options for this dinner party. And so if we go to the next one, so one of the experiences that I have just recently gone through, my kiddos went back to school earlier last month. And so we are playing that lovely dance of, do we take lunch to school or do we eat school lunch? And it really just depends on the day, their mood, and what's being provided, and what mom is saying she will provide in a home lunch. And so that's one of those key pieces that choice is not the same as variety. So you can see we have our little menu here Monday through Friday. Now we can look at it as, a school lunch for our kids, or if you're a meal prepper like I am, it could be your schedule for dinner at home every night. So Monday we have lasagna. Tuesday it looks like we have sort of a vegetable soup. Wednesday, a Cobb salad. Thursday, we're doing tacos, and Friday, we're doing pizza. Now, again, we had mentioned some of those dietary restrictions. Now, on Monday, if you have a dairy allergy, you could potentially skip the Parmesan cheese on top, but that's only if they didn't put, a cream in the pasta sauce. And then you can also see you've got cheese on the pizza. You've also got meat on that spaghetti, the tacos. So we're not really providing variety for the individuals, either if they are eating lunch at school or at home for dinner. It really is about giving those different choices. So again, if we did like a deconstructed kind of meal to where whoever it is that's eating these meals can pick and choose what they want, or if we provided multiple options. So maybe with the spaghetti noodles, we made traditional spaghetti noodles, and then we had some of those vegetable zoodles.
Zucchini noodles,
Is that what they
yes.
called? Yeah, zoodles on there.
Zoodles, I love my zoodles. Yes.
And making sure just to give multiple choices to meet the needs of the individuals that we're serving these meals to.
So now we have you talking about food, and again, we're right before the lunch hour, so get you prepped for lunch. But we want to show you this next video because it really does give you a nice transition into taking that variability from that dinner party and looking at it in an educational context. So let me... Hang on.
And while Amy is pulling that up, I do want to note I shared a couple of links in the chat. One is UDL resources on our website, which also includes this video that you're about to see. And then we have multiple other little short informational videos regarding UDL and the core concepts. So if you have other faculty members or administrators who want to kind of get those basic concepts of universal design for learning, these are wonderful videos to share with them, to play with them, just to get those quick snippets of information on what UDL
helps me
is.
save time and work more efficiently when I am multitasking, specifically when I'm switching between writing brand.
This is one of the videos.
Have you ever attended a dinner party where the host prepared tasty and inviting food, attractively displayed it on a large table, pulled up a comfortable chair and invited you to feast, but not provide any silverware to use to eat the meal? By the way, the meal consists of pasta with a very messy sauce. Of course not. Why? Because your host knows simply providing food is not a good host. Tools to eat the food need to be in place to ensure a positive experience. You might be able to consume some of that pasta, but it would not be efficient. It will certainly be messy and not as enjoyable as it could have been. Classrooms are the same. Clearly, educators need well-defined lessons that outline the content. The what we are teaching is the meal we are serving. In addition to the meal, educators need to set the table for learning. The silverware pieces are our learning strategies. Teaching our students how to learn is providing the tools they will need to ingest the information, process it through their individual learning system, and gain value. Remember, we all want to attend that symbolic dinner party only if it is an inviting, positive place and we see how it will fill our needs. For classrooms, this means we need to make sure we provide the why of learning so learners understand how this information will benefit them and they are motivated to be in class and to learn once they are there. As you cook up your next learning lesson, remember to set the table for learning. Your learners will keep coming back for more.
I think I shut it off, and I don't shut it off. Whoop, there we go. Okay, so that ties together that whole dinner analogy. And then just another, and I'm going to make this pretty short because I want to think about designing for variability. And this gentleman in front of you is Hussein Bolt. And for a brief time, he was the fastest man on the planet. He was amazing. And what happens to all of us, he's gotten a little older and other people younger have gotten faster. But he wears, if you didn't know, he wears a size 11.5 shoe. The average shoe for men is 8.5, which I found interesting, but it is. And so if we decide on the average, if we were to pass out shoes and everyone got an average 8.5 shoe, would have Hussein Bolt been able to run as fast as he was able to run in a well-fitting shoe? And probably not, right? Probably he would have either A, ran barefoot, or been very uncomfortable trying to shove his feet into those shoes. So the idea is variability is important. We see variability in all kinds of aspects of our day-to-day. The cockpit analogy really rings true with me with my car. I have a son who's turning 16 soon, and he is 5'11.5". I'm not giving him 6 foot yet. And I am not. I am 5'6". So when I'm driving my car, the seat is sat a little closer. I have to make all my adjustments. When he gets in, the seat is way far back and sat in a different position. And so that variability allows us to both be successful at driving the car, but we have to have things fit to meet our needs. Same with the shoes. If I were to buy all of you a pair of shoes, but I would buy it in my size, which is a size 8, I'm guessing some of you would be ecstatic. Yeah, it fits. But others of you would be like, no, I don't really need a size 8 shoe. So same with the learning environment. When you assign assignments, or when we're looking at how we're setting up things in our institution, or how we're setting up study hours or office hours or things of that nature, we want to be sure that we're designing for all of our students and considering all of our students. Back to that human-centered approach, looking at who are the humans who we're trying to interact with. And if those are students who are working during the day and need to come at night, maybe the library needs to be open or the computer lab needs to be open later. Maybe our office hours should not be just from 8 to 4:30 or within those standard work days. Maybe they could be a virtual office hour later in the evening for some of our students. Those are those wonderful things, that little tiny things that we could do that really do make our institutions more accessible. So right now I want to pause and I want to see what resonates with you, what questions you have, and what might work in your context. So let's open this up for discussion now. And you are all, this is a Zoom meeting, so you're all able to unmute. You can show your cameras if you'd like to, but what's resonating so far?
I was going to say Angela Snow from Carl Sandburg College. Not only when you're talking about the books about being age appropriate, maybe that person is age appropriate, maybe they're dyslexic, maybe they have a speech impediment, maybe they have a learning disability, maybe they need someone to help them. This is a great presentation. It really is a nice analogy from the classroom to the dinner table and stuff. And you think you got it all figured out, but you don't. So I've never seen something quite like this before. So I like how you're doing this.
Thank you very much. And then Mariah posted in the chat, there is no one size fits all way of learning. Absolutely. I have a very strong-willed younger son, and we have a discussion often because he likes using the words all, like all of the students did this, or all of my teachers do this. And I often, literally every night, have conversations about, well, is it really all, or is it one instructor who's doing this, or one book who's doing this? When he is engaged and when he is interested, he is an excellent student and really loves to learn and does well. When he is not engaged and when they are not making things contextual to why do I need to learn this, because he's that kid who asks, why should I learn? And when he gets that question, he doesn't get an answer that actually resonates because is not a good answer for him. He does disengage, and then those are fun challenges to get him back on the little wagon of learning. But jagged learning through different dimensions and characteristics is fantastic. Craig, yes, we have a lot of, we have students coming to us with a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different issues, a lot of different barriers. And how do we use universal design to address the barrier to help the student succeed? Again, one of the things that we use often is transportation. How do we address those issues for getting our students to our campuses to learn?
Well, I'm going to take this opportunity to go ahead and put myself and Amy's email addresses in the chat. So if you have questions throughout, please feel free to put those in the chat, raise your hand, interrupt us. But if you go back and kind of resonate on some of the information, look at the resources that we've shared, and you have any additional questions, you can always contact us via email as well.
Oh, absolutely. We are always here as a resource. And as I said, we're kind of UDL nerds, so we do love this stuff. The next thing I want to say is we've got variability. Everybody understands that variability is that idea of everybody gets what they need for success and what they're looking at, and just having some options. We'll talk about what that looks like in the classrooms in a minute. But variability is contextual. So we've stole this from CAST. We were trained by CAST. So that's why you see CAST there in some of the icons. North is somebody who likes to take action. So this is how they've described this. North is a person who likes to take action, try new things, and likes to plunge in. East, you like to look at the big picture, all the possibilities, and then you'll decide what you want to do. If you're a South kind of person, you like to consider everyone's feelings, hear all the voices, and then you'll make a decision. And then West likes to know the who, the what, the when, the where, the how, and then they'll make an action or decide what they want to do. So I'm guessing as you're sitting there, you're thinking, oh, okay, my mother-in-law's a North, my husband or partner is an East, my son is a South, things of that nature. But I want you to understand that though variability is important and you do have definite personalities in with variability, variability is very contextual. So let's give a scenario here. You're planning a party for your best friend's birthday, okay? Are you, and go ahead and throw this in the chat, are you a North? Do you plunge right in? Are you an East? Do you look at that big picture? Are you a South? Do you consider everyone's feelings? Or are you a West? Do you pay attention to the details? The thing that's important with understanding variability in UDL is that in some situations, you're a North, you plunge right in. In other situations, you're going to be a South, you're going to consider one's feelings. Also, context. During the pandemic, if we were having any kind of gathering, especially with my friend group and family, we had to be considerate of other people's feelings because we were in a very new and developing time. Prior to the pandemic, I think when party planning, I was a one, let's look at the big picture and plunge right in, a Northeaster, fantastic. As we moved through, I became more of a Southwester, making sure everything was covered. I see a lot of, yes, I see you guys are copying that as well. And Angela, all four depending on the situation. So we've got some West, we've got some East and South, some East and West, Southwest, fantastic. But I really want you to understand that point that The idea of variability, the idea of being a north, south, east, west, and how you approach a situation is also possibly different from how you operate at home versus how you operate at work. And there is dynamics within friend groups, there is dynamics within families, and some people are the north, some people are the east, some people are the south, and then you put them in a different situation and that fluctuates as well. So just a fun little analogy there. Core concept of UBL is variability is a norm. So I want to just unpack this a little bit. We can design for variability. Variability is predictable in learning and can be designed for, but it is the norm. There is no average person. There's not a student who walks in and you're like, oh my gosh, they're average in everything. They just don't exist. We've got that, yes? Okay. So the UDL and the learning brain, there is no average brain, so that's important. The brain has incredible plasticity, and the plasticity allows it to make those connections and learn. And depending, and if you've really studied neurodiversity and look at, there's a fantastic study by Lise Elliott called Pink Brain, Blue Brain that came out, I want to say in the early 2000s, great study looking at that plasticity and the way in which making those connections do not impact gender, but impact the way in which girls, so for example, if you have young women in your life, if they play with Legos as young people in their, toddler and formative years, they will have better math and spatial reasoning skills than girls who do not play with Legos. If there are just things introduced and how things are introduced do define and have an influence on gender identity. So it's a really fun study there if you're interested in that neurodiversity issue. And then goals drive the neurosystem. So we have three networks in the brain. We have the affective network, the why, the strategic network, the how, and the recognition network, the what. And we talked about this in the video, so we're going to go through this pretty quick because I do want to let you have minutes to have conversations and also talk about all the other fun stuff we have on the agenda. So starting with the why, think about the now and the how. Affective networks, or the why is, they're on delayed, recruit interest, sustained effort and persistence, and then self-regulation. This is a diagram that we'll share out as well. This is the 3 layers of UDL guidelines: creating access, making learning meaningful, building the learning skills, and then being independent. And you have the access build on the side there, and then you have the engagement, representation, and action and expression across the top. So those 3 different areas. And we'll talk about multiple means of engagement. That's a big deep into UDL, multiple means of representation and multiple means of action and representation, and what those look like within your classroom. So are you allowing your students to, for example, when I teach, they have to do a presentation on a social theory and how that social theory ties in with the continuous improvement model. And so we're looking at taking, something like gender theory and applying it to a continuous improvement model around recruitment. But they can present in any form or fashion that they want to. So they get that multiple means of action and expression that they might not have in some other assignments. Next is the how, multiple means of action and expression. And then those are the ways in which we have the how, the affective network, physical action, expression, and communications, those executive functions that we spend a lot of time with as we talk about learning development. So what can you do? Find out your institution's policies and practices around accessibility and accommodations. You all are at community colleges. Community colleges are some of the best and most well-informed and supported students in the whole country, because there are great accessibility centers. You have your student support center, and Brittany and I have worked in the community college system now for many, many years, and it just is always so impressive to talk to those people in student services or in student supports and looking at how students can be supported. Share policies and resources with your students, add them to your syllabus, let them know what accommodations are available to them. Inform yourself about where students can go for help and share that information with your students early and often. And like for me, I put that in the syllabus, we walk through it in the syllabus, we go through all of that content. And then build your own and your students' best practices. What are things that have worked well for your students? And Brittany, do you want to take the what?
Yeah, absolutely. So considering the what is looking at that multiple means of representation. And so when you're working with your students, and we'll let the little imagery go here, that perception, language and symbols comprehension. It's, as educators, you all know that there are different learning styles, and each individual has their own learning style. And so whether it's, making sure that you're providing options for visual instruction for individuals to take that information in visually, i.e. the PowerPoint slides that we're providing here, or the videos that we shared with you, as well as auditorially, right? We're speaking that information to you as well. Just making sure that they're having those multiple options, and not just providing them with the one of, okay, now I need you to write this essay to show me that you have taken in the information that I've just shared, digested it, and can, express that in a written format. But allowing the students to pick and choose those avenues of expression that best suit them and how they learn the information and the knowledge that they have gained from your class, as well as being able to take that information and contextualize it in a format that's either applicable to the field of work that they are interested in going into, or if they are furthering their education even more, being able to provide that additional applicability to the knowledge that they are gaining.
So I'm going to go really quick through some examples of UDL in the classroom, and then we're going to open it up. Okay. So what I've been doing, an extended response writing introduction. I give a brief verbal introduction. I follow with an example question. I focus on the prompt. I give students a formula, and then I practice making an outline. So this would be like an introduction to writing course. Infusing UDL, create slides, skeleton notes, record the introduction so people can come back and watch it later, just like we're doing here today. And opportunities for reflection, looking at red, green, and yellow cards, asking for understanding, that thumbs up, that rip, asking you to post things in the chat and be engaged. Those are things that you are actually implementing UDL. Looking at infusing UDL, having students have copies of the sample questions, choices of how to read alone or with a partner, opportunities for vocabulary, grammar, and language growth, all within that UDL as well. And then rather than being told, the students have an opportunity, rather than being told, do the students have an opportunity to explore or decipher what questions is being asked, opposed to the initial thoughts? Is there room for conversation? Is there room for engagement? One of the things, which is a really easy thing for UDL in the classroom, is posting your syllabus ahead of time. So your students walk in and know what the syllabus is. The other thing is letting them know just what the agenda is for the day. So that practice of saying, okay, this is how we're going to spend our time together, that's UDL. That's a nice, simple way to really add UDL in. Giving students visual representation, key essay organization, color coding. Color coding is huge. You'll see that in our presentations. I mean, that was pretty intentional for us. If you go back here, see how the green is with the green, and see all the color representation that I'm clicking through kind of quickly here for you. But that color scheme, bolding with color, is an infusion of UDL in a presentation. And then practice making an outline, give examples. We like that when we're doing grant writing, right? We ask the state, we're like, hey, can you give us an example of what this is going to look like? Students like it as well. So really that idea of being human focused. Provide more charts and visuals to help students increase understanding, and then ample examples of what, and provide access to their own on their own time. We talk a little bit about screen capture, and one of the things that's really important with screen capture is making sure that it's accurate. And so you can go back into Zoom and edit your videos and make sure that they actually reflect what is being said. And we have a whole session on that as well. And then
I think, Amy, really quick, since you mentioned Zoom, I think Zoom, while it can be frustrating for me at times, I want to give it credit where credit is due, because Zoom is a perfect example of, they've made some massive updates over the last couple of years in order to accommodate, everyone pretty much working remotely from home because of the pandemic. And I think I try to always find that silver lining of the pandemic and those key takeaways that are actually positive and that we can continue to incorporate as we move forward and adjust to life post pandemic. But I mean, you can even look at your Zoom toolbar. We have those reactions where you can raise your hand, give a thumbs up. You can ask the presenter to slow down, or you say, okay, you're talking about this point, we got it, we understand the concept, can we move forward? And I think making sure that we are utilizing those elements in the virtual setting, but also making sure that as we start to move back to in person within our classroom, within our labs, that we continue to put those elements into play when we are in person, and so that we allow our students to communicate with us in some way that they need extra attention, or they need to, can you cover that concept a little bit more in depth before you move forward? Because again, like I said, Zoom has been great about allowing for that to happen in the virtual world. We just need to make sure that we can move that into the in-person world as well.
Well, and I'm going to date myself a little bit, but when I was in college and when I was in high school, I did not have email to email my teachers to ask questions. I did not have Teams where all my class materials were held to go see questions, or Google. I know that a big K-12 uses Google. Our university uses Teams. But they have all that. So it's one of those things that if there are questions, if there are ways to engage with them, use all those mechanisms that you can use. So I teach on Teams and in person, but everything's on Teams. So if there's like a cool article that comes out, I can throw that out on Teams. They can access you through email. There's a whole separate talk that I do on not allowing them to have your personal cell phone numbers, but to each their own on that one. That's not what we're here to talk about today. But I do think, Brittany, you made such a great point, because there's so many ways we can engage with our students. And even those of you who are in the audience, if you're not faculty, you're still engaging with students, because the student is our customer. I mean, they're who's coming to our community colleges. They are who we are there to serve. And when we talk about being human focused, they're the humans who are our audience. With that, I do want to ask these questions. So what could you add to infuse UDL? What benefits could infusing UDL provide to your students? And really, how are you all feeling about today? Has this been good for you? Or you have questions? Show a virtual thumbs up, or one of those react. Okay, I got some thumbs up. Okay, good. If you'd like to answer any of those questions in the chat or unmute, I will grab through. This is some resources that we'll post in the chat. The first is some videos. Actually, those are already been posted. And then there's a lot of UDL resources. There's a lot of free resources, which is my favorite price for resources. There is a video about McGill University, which is so important because that is a university that is entirely infused with UDL. So you can see the way it looks in an institutional practice. So great video there. And then there is, and I know it's a 15-year-old document, but there is a 2006 Universal Design for Learning and Post-Secondary Education Reflection on Principles and Their Application. Fantastic article, still applicable 15 years later, but very fantastic article. I want to close with a couple talking points, and then I'm going to unshare my screen and we'll open up the floor. But UDL is not a checklist, so I really want you to take that away. If you infuse UDL based on your goals and what you want to do, but it's not a checklist. It's not saying I'm going to do this, this, and this, and then I have universal design or I have human-centered approach. It's really being aware of who our audience is or who our customer is as we move through that, who the humans are, as the gentleman in the video said, who the humans are that we're serving. Teach students how to learn, not just what to learn. Very important. Show them how to use the resources that they have. I teach at all levels, and when I teach at the graduate level, sometimes I have to go in and explain, okay, this is Teams, this is how you get into Teams, this is where we're going to be posting things, because you want to be sure that they know how to find that information, and that's teaching them how to learn, not just what to learn. And then UDL varies in every context, but small changes can make a huge, huge difference. So I'm going to leave you with that slide. I'm actually going to stop sharing there and just open the floor up. What questions do you have? Is there anything you want to ask about? I'll stop talking. Let me talk more.
Well, and Amy, I will share too, because I gotta fill that silence. But we are working with ICCB to create a website for learning renewal. So I know we threw a lot of resources at you today, but we will make sure that the individuals on this call will receive a PDF version of the PowerPoint. We are recording this as I got the wonderful reminder to hit that lovely record button that I so often forget to do. And then we will also have that website where we will have additional resources posted for you to be able to access and utilize. Again, we're talking about UDL. We want to talk the talk and walk the walk as well, and provide you with the resources and multiple avenues that you can locate them and utilize them.
And there is a lot of additional stuff that we'll link to that website. So the website should be coming out, I would say, maybe before the end of the month, but definitely within the month of October. And then the next time we get together, we're going to be talking about marketing. There's some great marketing toolkits and ways in which we can engage with our students as we're coming in all times, whether it was pandemic or not pandemic, but how do we engage with students? We have said this is kind of time for discussion. Any challenges, accomplishments? I do not see an ICCB person on, so there's not a state ICCB update. But if there are any challenges or accomplishments you'd like to share, I'd love to open the floor for that.
Hi, just wanted to say this was great. I wasn't very familiar with UDL before this, so I actually work in my community college library, and I was reading a book on customer service in libraries, and it did discuss that it's best not to assume the skill level of your patrons that come in. And I think this kind of ties into UDL because, everyone does things differently, including, in the customer service spectrum. Not all young students, know how to be tech savvy and know how to print and how to find things on their phones. And not all of our older patrons, they may not know how to read very well, or maybe they have some issues there. So this was great. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. And Mariah, I think you brought up something there too that I think is important to point out when it comes to UDL. It doesn't mean that you have to use the most high-tech, up-to-date technology in order to provide those multiple means of expressions for students or multiple means of gaining that information. You also don't have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to implement this into your class. It really is just about taking those small steps. And as Amy mentioned, really looking at the way that you're setting up your curriculum, your syllabus, your classroom, whether that's in person or virtual, through that UDL lens, and then making those small adjustments here and there where you can.
And human-centered design spends a lot of time on the infrastructure itself. Like, what does your building look like? Is it inviting? What does your website look like? UDL also talks about that. Are the things that students need to find easy to find? Because sometimes, as institutions, we like to put things that we think are important to us out in the forefront, on the bling, on the page, but it might not be what our students are looking for. And a great way to know is to ask. Did you find have you been able to find that stuff? Doing little surveys or something that's in a class, add that to an English class, 5-minute, 3-minute, 2-minute survey saying, are you finding what you needed, will make a huge difference. But also just looking at your building from accessibility and what are the barriers to get into the building, or are there barriers to get into the building? Thank you. Great comments though. Any other comments?
Yeah, Jacob says changing one assignment to offer alternative submissions is a step in the right direction. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Anything else you want to share? If we give you back time, we will not tell anyone. We have to cut that out of the recording. So I want to thank you all for hanging with us today. Again, if you have any questions, you have our email. We'll be sharing all this out to everybody who registers. And as that website should be up, I would say fairly quickly. I got ICCB to okay a logo, so I'm doing good. And we'll get that out to you. And then that is where all of the information will be stored. All of the information will also be housed, and then we'll be linking back to that on those listserv announcements. But you'll be joining us next month, hopefully, or tell your friends to join us next month. We'll be bringing in individuals who work with marketing and talk about marketing and how to really market programs, institutions, and really get the word out. So thank you so very much for your time and your questions and your engagement.